Okay, so as we know, Multiversus is coming back. It's dropping on May 28th. And with that, it's going to be the full game, not the beta anymore. So a lot of stuff is expected to change. Because of the fact that the game could very drastically change, I just want to take some time to log some of the crazier stuff in the beta for those of you who may not have played it. Now, I should mention, I'm not exactly a noob. You know, I've put a good amount of hours into this game, and I've played a lot of 2s specifically. And over the hours that I put into the game, like any other fighting game, I've heard complaints about every single character, just how broken they could be in their own right. What I'd like to do today, though, is focus on those more underrated characters that you didn't really hear a whole lot of, especially if you were more of a casual coming into the game. So go ahead, grab your popcorn, and get comfy in your seats, because today, we're going to go ahead and look at some of the most problematic characters in the Multiversus beta. I do want to go ahead and preface that most of my experience is in 2s, so there are going to be a few characters that I leave out that are strong in 1s, but not so strong in 2s. I do acknowledge that a majority of the player base does know the game for 1s, as it's more accessible and is more in line with what you would expect with a standard platform fighter or fighting game in general. So with all that said, I'm going to quickly cover a handful of characters that I either did not think were problem characters, were only problem characters in 1s, or were problem characters, but problem characters that everyone knew, so they don't really warrant the discussion. The first character that I'd like to address, and that I didn't really think was all that problematic, was Shaggy. I think he's mostly a relatively inoffensive pub stomper who ended up seeing a lot of nerfs and buffs, but was never really OP, but to a lot of casuals just kind of jumping into the game, he was pretty overwhelming. I'd like to group Batman and Jake together because while they were really oppressive in 1s, in 2s they ended up having a lot of answers and really weren't all that strong. And lastly, another pair of characters I'd really like to touch on before we get into it is Bugs and Velma. The main reason I'm not really going to cover them is because it's been preached a million times over. Everyone knows that Bugs and Velma were just insanely broken and warped the meta. Okay, with all the disclaimers and intros out of the way, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so at number 1, we have Superman, and while this may be more of a personal gripe, he is the entire reason I made this video in the first place. Just for a little added context, Superman was extremely undersold. All the Superman mains were consistently saying that he was unplayable and just a trash character, which was just not true. Superman had this really degenerate combo of either just completely laming you out and not approaching at all, or he was just touching you once and you were dying for it. This was made even worse because a lot of the players really quickly gravitated towards the more degenerate strategies. At the beginning of the beta, it was more so him just sitting at the ledge spamming up B, which wasn't too bad, but if you got caught by it, you would legitimately just die. He would get his resources back just from touching the wall, so he would just sit there and plank the entire time and not interact with you at all, and just gamble on the opportunity that he would just hit you with his up B and kill you off of it. Thankfully, they ended up nerfing this pretty considerably as they made the base knockback a lot lower. So while he can still do this, you can't just be at 0 and just die for no reason just for trying to contest him. That being said though, as soon as this kill you in one touch from just camping ledge cheese was removed, they started just camping you in the air with aerial eye lasers. He would just double jump up as high as he possibly could and spam those aerial eye lasers, so he would just constantly tack on damage. But at the same time, because he was just so far away, he was nearly uncontestable, so he would just get free damage consistently and just stay away from you the entire game. And then they had to nerf that by giving ammo to his eye lasers so that you would actually have to play the game with you once in a while. But don't count out Superman mains just yet, because as soon as that was nerfed, they just started spamming Ice Breath. And then they had to add a cooldown onto that to make sure that they would stop doing that as well. Like, legitimately, for a tank bruiser, it seems like all the Superman mains wanted to do would just find new ways to not play the game with you. So obviously the characters had a lot of broken stuff that have seen consistent nerfs, primarily because this isn't the way that, they've intended for him to play, but the way that he's intended to play is even crazier. Because if a Superman main decides that they actually want to play the game with you, they just start one-shotting you. Superman is up there as one of the characters that can touch you once and just carry you to the blast zone. Despite the base knockback on his up B getting nerfed, his up B and side B still were super active and invalidated a lot of recoveries and dodges. Steven in particular just absolutely dies every time that Superman gets his hands on him, because not only does he not have his signature shield mechanic, his dodges are just so unbelievably short that he just can't escape the Superman blender. Hell, you'd think he would be worse in 2s because he's not able to just one-touch you, but he's actually got some shockingly good attributes, one of the best being that he's heavy, which is really good for just being a stock tank in teams. Because he's so heavy, you don't really have to worry about him dying consistently or like really at all. Not to mention his side B is really difficult to actually contest in an edge guard, so you can't even cheese him that way. Ice Breath alone stops a lot of projectiles, slows opponents, and just starts tacking on good damage. And even though lasers was nerfed, you still can't just ignore the damage whenever he does have ammo up. Not to mention, especially if you know it's coming, it'll still keep you off the ground, which can be a pretty vulnerable position for some characters. But for now, that's enough about Superman. There is, however, another character that's broken on a fundamental level that is also balanced around the ability of being able to one-shot you. Arya was a weird case in most of the Multiversus beta, as either she was broken or she was unplayable. It all really depended on the patch. The main reason is that the devs wanted to give her an insta-kill combo. Yeah, you heard that right. This character is intentionally designed with an ability to touch you once and kill you. Now, the reason that she would fluctuate a lot whenever it came to her win rate is that the devs couldn't decide how much reading she would need to have to do in order to actually get that kill combo. When the kill combo worked, she was absolutely broken. She would touch you once and you would die, and that was the end of the story. But when it didn't work, it was absolutely useless and you really couldn't play her. It definitely didn't help that a lot of the online issues would also make her kill combo inconsistent. Now you may be thinking, this sounds great in 1s, but how does this translate to 2s? I mean, you didn't include Batman or Jake here because specifically they were only strong in 1s. But that's the thing though. It worked even better in 2s, and it was even more consistent. Not only does she have more options because she's able to face steal from her ally and go ahead and set up stuns for combos and all that good stuff, there were certain pairs with Arya that just all of a sudden became unbeatable if she was paired with them. The primary ones that come to mind are Gizmo and Velma. Gizmo's a character that had a really low play rate, but he had an astronomical win rate at times. My theory as to why this is that Gizmo would just hop on Arya and then he would up B at the end of her combo just to guarantee that her kill combo will actually kill regardless of the percent. Velma on the other hand would just straight up shoot her speech bubbles at Arya all match. This would not only give Arya a free approach, but would also have a heat-seeking projectile at the end of her combo strings to guarantee that stock's taken. Now, Arya, while broken in design, is kinda hard to call underrated because of just how her win rate would fluctuate. The next character I have though is 100% underrated. Iron Giant had the highest win rate throughout the entirety of the game, and I've never heard anyone complain about Iron Giant. I think a big reason this is that a lot of Iron Giant's impact you don't really feel. You don't really get hit with anything by Iron Giant and think that that was broken. Most Iron Giant matches feel pretty normal until you get to the results screen and see the damage that he did. You see, Iron Giant actually has this passive called Thorns, which makes it so that every time he or an ally gets gray health, he gets a stack of Thorns. What these stacks do though is they make it so every time that he gets hit, he actually does a portion of the damage to his opponent. So even though everyone enjoys running down the big Iron Giant and trying to combo him to death, they're taking a lot of damage whenever they do so. Not to mention, he would just constantly spam his down air just in place and sit in it, so not only would you be taking Thorns damage, you'd also be taking burn damage for just a huge amount of your life. And while before I argued that you don't really feel Iron Giant's influence, when he hits you once and you just die for it, not really knowing how you took all that damage in the first place, you really start feeling it. There was, in fact, a couple patches though where he did feel really impactful. While it was quickly nerfed, people found out that if you hit someone with a Giant's command grab, they could just straight up kill you, and there was nothing you could do about it. Iron Giant would either just walk you to the ledge and spike you, or he'd just do his up B and carry you into the blast zone. So picture this, you're comboing the shit out of Iron Giant and just absolutely walloping on this guy. All of a sudden he pops his reversal, command grabs you, and you die. So while no one really complained about Iron Giant, I'm sure you can see why he has the highest win rate throughout most of the Multiversus patches. And the last character I'd really like to talk about from the beta that might get changed pretty significantly is Morty. Morty was another character like Iron Giant that pretty much consistently had a high win rate, but you never really felt the impact of in 2s. One of the strongest parts of Morty is his ability to slow the game down to an absolute crawl. One of the more obvious reasons he's able to do this is his grenades, as you can't exactly just run down a Morty who's just sitting on a grenade. You kind of have to wait for the grenade to go off. That also doubles since he's able to also put grenades on his allies, so you can't really run them down either, so a lot of it just boils down to waiting. He's also got really good disjoints that are really hard to box with, so sometimes the gameplay can just boil down to you waiting on him to approach and then whip punishing him for it. Because if you do try to contest him there, most of the time because he has that disjoint, you are going to lose out and he is just going to go ahead and start running his advantage. That's not to say his aerials are uncontestable or anything, as most of the time you can just armor through with most characters. Or if you're a character that doesn't have armor, usually you have a projectile that'll be able to beat him out. But arguably the biggest reason he's able to just slow down the game so much is his ability to just give second chances to himself and other teammates. Morty is possibly the most difficult character in the game to edgeguard. Because of the armor on his side B and the resource refresh from his up B, it can make it really difficult to actually contest his recovery. And then his down B works as a really good get out of jail free card for both himself and his allies whenever it comes to recovering. Because of the properties of his down special, if he pops it and his ally gets put into the blast zone, they'll automatically just teleport to him if they were to die. Not to mention, even when this happens, he can still activate the down special himself and teleport to like center stage or wherever he put it down in the first place. So needless to say, it's really hard to close stocks whenever Morty's on the enemy team. Alright, and with that, I think that wraps up pretty much all of the underrated characters that I wanted to talk about today from the Multiversus beta. There was some pretty crazy stuff in here. From the changes I see in the announcement trailer, I do think a lot of these issues will be patched up, as I think they're really listening to feedback. There are still plenty of characters that I ended up missing out on that I didn't really get the chance to talk about, but I may make a video on them sometime in the future. Be sure to let me know what you guys think in the comments below, give a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I actually have a few video ideas I'd really like to get out before the game's fully released, as well as shorts scheduled pretty much every day until the game is fully released, so be sure to go check those out. And yeah, that's a wrap. See you guys in the next video.